Hello students and welcome back to another installment in our DOVAD series. So today I will be going over Illustrator and how we leverage that to our advantage in our art classes. So I'd like you to make sure to look at the show notes I have where I list out everything related to Illustrator. I have all of the show notes down below in different steps and diagrams to better assist you as we move forward. So make sure to check out that nice resource for you. It's all there and outlined. So if you need further investigation, you can go ahead and look at it there. So I'm going to get started and give you a really brief rundown of opening Illustrator. So make sure to always exercise best practice and be using the latest version of Illustrator available to you. And keep in mind that machines on campus may have different years of Illustrator compared to what you have on your personal computer or laptop. So once we get into Illustrator, it's really important to understand this screen that we're greeted with when we start. So our new file button is located here. We can open additional files here, Illustrator files. And then in addition, we have our home page, which will take you here. And then we have files related to the cloud with Adobe where you could save files if you wish. I recommend taking advantage of our 500 free gigabytes here at Weber State University. And then just a few other things. Our advertisements are always listed up here. And then our recent files you can access are located down below. Another important factor, make sure that you're logged in on the top right. So if you click that, it will bring you to your Adobe account. And you can also access other things like Adobe Color and Adobe Font. So we won't be getting into all the small wingdings of the program. This is more shooting from the hip and getting you comfortable. So let's start a new file. So I'm starting here just by clicking new file, and then I'm greeted with what we call the new document screen. And so I'm going to enlarge that so we can get a better look at it. And there's a few things going on here, so it's important that we understand really what Illustrator is and why we use it. So Illustrator is what we call a vector-based program, and vector-based means that the lines, shapes, forms, anchor points are all supported with mathematical equations. So that'll allow you to infinitely scale, so bring things up and bring things down without causing any issues. So that's very different from a pixel-based program or raster-based program such as Photoshop. So keep that in mind, that something like a PDF, that is a vector. And so working in Adobe Illustrator, everything's going to be a vector. So everything is a nice clean line, shape, form, etc. So now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at this new document screen. And here we have what are called our presets. And down below, you can choose within that category. So for example, we have mobile, web, print, etc. For all intents and purposes, I prefer to create our own. That way we have more control and understanding of what needs to happen. So you can name your preset right here. I'm going to call this Aaron's test file. And then down below, we can start to detail out the different increments we're using. I recommend working in inches. Again, you may find that pixels are more helpful for you. If you're working on something more web design based, you'll definitely want to be using pixels. And so once we get in there, I'm just going to create almost like a license plate size. Okay, so I have 5 by 9 inches roughly, and I want front and back. I'm just doing a quick example. So make sure to click to artboards, and remember that artboard, just like in Photoshop, that's our literal canvas behind it. We call it artboard in Adobe products, and that's the same across the board for Photoshop as well. And then here we have what's called bleed. Make sure to take a look at the show notes down below because I detail out why this is important. This is needed for printed media. So it'll allow your image to stretch out just a little bit beyond where it needs to go so that when that gets cut out literally by hand, a machine by hand, whatever it may be, X-Acto knife and ruler, that you don't have a weird white space hanging off where it didn't print. So make sure to take advantage of that if needed. And then our color mode, CMYK, will be for print, and then RGB is for color. And then a good way to remember that is getting printers to work is always very difficult, and saying CMYK, 4 letters, is also very difficult. So that's what I like to teach my students. So now that we have that, I'm going to just leave my raster effects here on 300 ppi. So there are some raster effects sprinkled throughout, and we'll also see using the image trace tool how we can almost transition, or how we can actually transition items from raster, which is pixel based, to actual vectors. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're greeted with our screen here, and let's talk about a few things like we did in our Photoshop video. So let's do a little housekeeping and make sure that our workspace is set to essentials. You can use whatever works best for you, but for this project, for this video, we'll be using our essentials. And if this workspace doesn't look like mine, simply go up to Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials, and that will get everything back in working order. So just a quick lay of the land is here in Illustrator, we have what's called our properties, and that is going to control our vector graphics. And we will get into that moving forward in just a minute. And then here we have our layers panel, and then libraries. So libraries, we can link custom colors, color schemes, different wingdings, and different vectors that you use repeatedly in other projects. And then here for layers, let's give a quick rundown of this, and then we'll move on to tools. So the important part with layers is that we can always click and rename, all right? Just like that. So I'm going to call this test. And a few other things we have here too is we have this eyeball that can turn it on and off. So I'm going to select my layer, and I'm going to draw a line that will be on that layer, okay? And if I use my eyeball tool, that'll flicker that off, okay? And then just a few other things I want to show you is that if I expand this, I can start to create subcategories within this. Okay, so this is my layer now, and then I could just call this line 1. And for example, if I wanted to create another line, I could do that too, and I could just call that line 2. So this is a bit different from Photoshop because we actually have layers and layers instead of folders. So that is one key difference between our raster-based and vector-based programs. A few other things I want to mention is that down here, I click this plus button to create a new layer, and that anything that is at the top of that panel, that'll be on the topmost portion of my layers. So anything I draw on this red layer will be on top of the blue, okay? And you can see I can just turn that off. All right, so a few other things I want to talk about is that we have the ability to custom color these layers, which some of my students like to do, others don't, but simply click that, then click the 3 lines up here, and you can go to options for layer 2. And underneath that, you can change the name and you can change the color as well. So that is a nice feature that we have there. A few other things as well. If I'm clicking on a layer, I can click here as well to add a sublayer underneath that. So that's another quick tool. Okay, I'll show you a few other things going on here. So I do have more notes down below, so make sure to look at that. It'll give you a more in-depth understanding of all the little widgets here. But if I want to select everything on that layer, I can simply click test and click this little triangle here and it will select that. Another similar way to do that is to also click our little target circle there as well. So that is a brief overview on layers. Now let's check out tools. So like I said before, we'll be working with vectors. So it'll be no surprise that we'll have things that are like shapes, different line work, curves, etc. So up here we have our selection tool, and then down here if you hover, it'll tell you the name of it. We have our direct selection tool, which will allow us to get picky and select anchors within lines. So I'm going to get started and just draw a quick line for you. So here I'm just drawing very pretty mountains. Okay, and then if I just click my move arrow, you can see that I've drawn that. Okay, but let's say I want to edit my mountains a bit. I just click on this arrow here, and then you can see I can start to move what's called my anchor points. And so the anchor points are cruxes, intersections, or nodes within lineworks, curves, or shapes that allow you to intricately move and edit things. So remember that anchor points are really the backbone of our vector line work. Okay, and so now that I have that out of the way, another helpful tool is that I have this curve tool. Some students may find it helpful to use our line tool here and do their best to curve by clicking and dragging, but I want you to know that you'll end up with a more organic shape if you end up using the actual curvature tool in Illustrator. Okay, beyond that, we have our line tool, which we saw previously. We have our brush tool, which functions in a very similar way. And if you'd like to adjust any of that, you can go to your properties and start to play with the stroke and fill on those lines. Here we have our text, very straightforward. And then down below that, we have a few other tools. This is our rotate, and you can also just click with the direct selection tool here, and you can grab one of the edges and it will pop up like that. So that's a bit easier. We have our scissor tool, and that'll just snip things in half. And then right here, make sure to hover over because it will show you how to use it. We have our shape builder, which will combine multiple shapes together, just like it does in that little graphic. If you wanted to create a cloud, down below that, I have my gradient tool, which will allow me to establish certain patterns and gradients. So let's take a look at that. So if I double click on this, what I can do is I can create a shape and I can set my fill within that shape to that feature. So if I have a rectangle here, I can just add a gradient and I can start to edit its different features. Okay, here we have our dimension tools, eyedropper, which will give you different colors of already established imagery on your artboard. And then down below, we start to get a little more complex with our tools. I won't go too much into this because it is kind of going down the rabbit hole. But here we have our width, which will allow us to adjust certain components within the line. We have our artboard adjustment here, and then a few other things. Creating objects on paths. So the bare bones of this that I'll get to is shape generation. So we have all of our shapes here that you can choose from, and then just remember that we can edit all of those line works through our properties panel. Okay, so I want to go over a few other things. We are nearing the end here. So we covered settings in custom workspaces, and we reviewed the layers a bit. Now I want to teach you a quick hack on doing image trace. So image trace is really helpful if we're working on importing something that is more of a raster-based image. So I'm inserting a JPEG here, which is raster-based, it's pixel-based, to show you how to use that image trace tool. So this is really handy if a client gives you a logo that they don't necessarily have a vector of. So I have my JPEG right here, so I will simply go up to Window, and underneath Window, I'm going to go to I for image trace and click that. And once I have that up, I'll click on the image right here, and then I will go up into the settings and make sure that I have preview selected. And once that's selected, I will start to go up here and edit things to get my desired effect. So I can play with threshold, view, preset, mode, etc. Keep in mind that this is going to take really a tremendous amount of experimentation because this is something that can be quite difficult to master. So I have additional items that are shown down below in the show notes. So make sure to take an example or take a look at that, and then I'll give you further explanations about this. Okay, so once I have that here, I'll just click expand. So if I go into my little white arrow here, I can go in and I can start to see all this line work that has been formed, and I can even start to move that around. So you can see here all of that has been vectorized very easily. So if I want to take that, I can copy and paste it, and I can use it in other portions right here, and I can start to edit that. So I can open up this again, and I can start to move things around as I see fit. So that's a really basic introduction to Illustrator. So let me recap. We covered a few things. We covered layer management, understanding our tools, and in addition, we explored image trace and really how those layers work and how we create sublayers and different layers. Make sure to review those show notes, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.